What's going on, everybody? It's Achilles WT coming at you with a brand new video, and today, this time out, we will be going with a new build video. It has been quite a while since I put one of these out, and today's featured character will be Kerrigan, a character that I have not really showcased all that much, but a character that I highly enjoy. And to kind of put this out there ahead of time, typically with Kerrigan builds, you see players focusing on buffing her abilities over her basic attacks and her basic damage. This build is actually going to do the opposite because I found that it is something worth investing in, and Kerrigan is actually a very good character if you build her a certain way. If you build her a number of ways, she's a very strong character to use, and this is just one way that I found works. It works to a huge benefit, a huge advantage, because not only can she effectively deal with targets, single out targets and deal with targets with this build, but she could actually effectively push lanes, like almost as well as like a Sylvanas can, almost as well. So one thing I kind of want to bring up now before I get into this build video, if you saw my last Sonya video, I mentioned that I was experimenting with my graphics card a little bit and with my settings, and that I was ultimately able to run this game on the medium settings instead of the typical low that you see me running with. And the only thing that was kind of a trade-off was that my frames were a little bit lower, but it was not, you know, it wasn't too bad. So ultimately, I decided to just take the loss on the frames and bump it up to hopefully make this a better viewing experience for anybody that may be watching this video. So hopefully it's easier on the eyes and you enjoy the upgrade. So going into the build, really quickly, just we're going over Kerrigan's base abilities. Her Q is Ravage, leaps to an enemy to deal damage. Now, this ability may not be something that's super high in damage, but it is a very good distance closer, and it's something that you could actually use to either initiate or, as you read in the description, to finish fights. And that's actually the big thing that I love about her Q ability, is that if you use this ability to kill targets instead of initiate, it's instantly, it has an instant cooldown. It's instantly reset, so you could use it essentially to leap to another target, and the leap is very noticeable. It's not something that's just there, it's trivial. No, it's actually a really good gap closer, and it's something that could be very handy if used the right way. And the 8-second cooldown is not too severe, so that's another upside to this ability. Moving along to her W, Impaling Blades stuns and damage enemies in an area, deals 110 damage to enemies within the target area, and stunning them for 1 second. Now, this ability has a 12-second cooldown, but it has a 12-second cooldown for a reason, because the damage it deals is extremely good for a basic ability, but it isn't without some kind of trade-offs, because if you're not, like, this is the second half of what they call the Kerrigan combo, and I'll put it out there right now, I don't actively use the Kerrigan combo myself because I don't feel the need to, and honest, if we're being brutally honest, I'm just not all that great at landing it all the time, so I go through other means of wearing my opponents down and securing my own kills. But this is the second half of the Kerrigan combo, where you use Primal Grass to pull people into your blades, and it does a ton of damage and locks opponents down in place for a second. It's a really, really good way to go, and it's definitely something you would want to invest in. If you can get the targeting down or get the combo down, it's definitely worth your time. Moving along to her E ability, which this is an ability you're going to be spamming quite often, which is Primal Grass. Pull and damage enemies in an area. It pulls enemies within the target area towards you, dealing 50 damage. Same damage as Ravage, but and also the same cooldown as Ravage, which is actually pretty good, because that means you'll always have those two abilities on deck virtually at the same time, especially if you use this character the way I do. It's a really good ability that pulls a lot of targets closer to you and makes everything a lot easier on yourself. Moving along to her trait, Assimilation, gain a temporary shield by attacking enemies. Basically, this is the ability right here that kind of, if you build it, if you put some attention into this trait, this is the very thing that makes Kerrigan viable in virtually any situation. This is what I loved about this character, honestly. She's listed as hard, and I actually do believe that's an accurate assessment, because I don't necessarily feel like any player can pick this character up and dominate with her. I think you have to put in some time. You have to learn where her strengths are, what her money spots are, and things of that nature. But it becomes time well spent and invested if you can learn this character and get your own style and you know, make your bones with this character. But Assimilation is definitely something. This is going to be covered in the second half of the build, because this build does focus, I'm not sure if I mentioned this already, but this build does focus on buffing her basic attacks, because honestly, You can buff. There's nothing wrong with buffing her abilities, any of her basic abilities, but I find that if you don't, you really don't lose anything. They don't scale down at all. They're still every bit as handy without the extra incentives as they are with them. So, moving on to her heroics, Maelstrom. This is actually what I used to use on this character. It damages all nearby enemies. Basically forms a ring around her of like psionic energy, at least it looks like. And it deals 50 damage per second to nearby enemies and lasts for 9 seconds. Mind you, this is a really good ability to use on heroes, but the thing about this ability right here is that it does a ton of damage on siege units. Like, this is the kind of ability that if you have minions pushing in front of you towards a gate and 2 turrets, you queue this thing up and just wail on those things, those defenses go down extremely fast. Like, it's not even a challenge with this ability. But the downside to Maelstrom is that because it's close range, you do feel incentive to engage in fights like head on, like no matter what you're doing. The minute you queue this up, you feel the need to jump in the middle of situations. And Kerrigan doesn't exactly specialize in dealing with multiple targets at once. She's more of a hero that you definitely want singling out heroes and going to work, taking them out, and then moving on to a next target. You really don't want her getting in the middle of like mosh pits or team fights and just trying to swing at everything. Like, it will not end well for her, and you know, that's just something you want to keep in mind. One more thing I forgot to touch on with Assimilation is that if you build this trait the right way, essentially going into certain one-on-one altercations, momentarily, and I stress momentarily, Kerrigan almost becomes like a tank but maintains her assassin damage. So that's another reason you want to definitely keep an eye out for Assimilation as far as going through the build. And again, this build will actually work on Assimilation in the second half, so we'll get into that when we get into that. The heroic I do find myself using now is her second heroic, which is Summon Ultralisk. It summons an Ultralisk to attack an enemy. Basically, it summons a stronger buffed minion for you that attacks the target to deal 40 damage, and it does splash damage to nearby enemies for 50% damage. And you can retarget now as part of the last patch that they put on this character. You could actually retarget this thing even when you're dead, so that's another little benefit. The other benefit to this ability is that it has 40 seconds less on the cooldown than the other heroic, so that's definitely something you'll be able to use a lot more often. Moving on to the build now, and again, this build is going to focus on buffing her basic attacks, and so that you have something to follow through with after the her abilities, because you're going to be initiating, however you cut it, you're going to be initiating fights with your abilities and then moving on to your basic attacks. So basically the abilities on this character do a great amount of damage all the way from 1 to 20 if you don't touch them. So that's why my build focuses on the other side of it with the basic attacks, and she gets off a lot more basic attacks than you would think, so that's another little upside to this. So at level 1, I mean, looking at some of these talents here, Siphoning Impact is definitely one of these talents that I mentioned in other videos where it looks really good on paper, but it's something that I really don't feel you necessarily need. Yes, it does heal you every time you use your Q, but again, it's not something that I feel like you absolutely need, and it's a one-off. It's like, I'm not a fan of, like, I'm definitely not a fan of talents that don't have some kind of factor in the end game. I don't really favor talents that'll be good in the beginning, but then you don't really notice them at the end. I'm just not a fan of it, and I feel like Siphoning Impact is one of those. I feel like Sharpening Blades is definitely one of those. You would think, well, how? Like, it deals 20% more damage. It'll keep doing that for the rest of the game. Sure, but if you're missing those blades, then it's kind of just there for nothing. And that's another thing I like to look towards with opening talents. I like to look towards something that doesn't require too much difficulty or too much skill to get, you know, all the bang for your buck with the ability. So if you're good with the stuns, definitely Sharpening Blades is a good thing. Sweeping Grass is something I see a lot of people picking because it basically gives you longer range with that pull, and the pull is basically the ability you're going to be using the most out of everything. So I definitely see the reason why people pick this. I don't knock this at all. Block, I don't know. I'm like really lukewarm on this ability overall. I don't find myself even using this ability on tanks because I don't feel like it does as much as it should for a number 1 ability. So again, this build focuses on her auto attacks basically. So with that, at level 1, we're going to be going Seasoned Marksman. Kerrigan is, besides Raynor, in my opinion, the only other hero that Seasoned Marksman becomes game changing on. Like, and especially with the talent that we're going to be picking at level 4, this talent looms so large throughout the rest of the game, and we'll get into it at level 4, because moving on to level 4, you're going to be going with this build, at least you're going to be going with Fury of the Swarm, which basically gives you a cleave ability. So as you know, Seasoned Marksman kills enemies to gain basic attack damage. This builds the entire game. You just build stacks. Even when you die, you keep your stacks. You never lose your stacks. So basically, it can only improve. From when you put it on, it just keeps improving throughout the entire game. So for every 6 enemy minions or mercenaries killed near your hero, or killed by you, obviously, you gain 1 basic attack, and hero takedowns count as 2 minion kills. So with that being factored in, you only need 6 minions. Typically, I believe each minion wave is 6 on the dot. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. So when you add Fury of the Swarm to that first talent, when you're able to cleave, that basically means, for people who don't understand what a cleave is, when you attack one target, every other target in the nearby vicinity is taking damage as well. So with those first 2 talent picks, you're essentially able to clear out wave after wave after wave with relative ease. That means every wave you take out with this cleave ability is another stack added to your basic attack. So it definitely becomes, this build takes form right at level 4. This is not a build that's going to take long for you to see the benefits of it. You're going to see it from level 4 on. So moving on to level 7, you're going to go battle momentum. Again, just focus on your basic attacks, because your abilities are going to be very strong to begin with. They're going to continue to be strong throughout the game, so you don't really have to worry about them all that much. So remember, at level 1, you're picking a talent that makes your basic attack stronger. At level 4, you're picking a talent that makes your basic attack hit multiple enemies. So at level 7, battle momentum basically gives you, when you're basic attacking as it is, your cooldowns are being reduced every single time you swipe, and it's going to be happening that much faster, because you're like, when you're cleaving down enemies, it becomes something you don't even think about, essentially. So now, not only are your attacks getting stronger, you're taking out waves more and more. And I should have probably mentioned this at the beginning, but you're definitely going to want to take your laning a lot more serious with this build, because you definitely want to get some type of benefit out of your level 1 choice as Seasoned Marksman. You don't want to just sitting there. You do want to go after heroes with this build, because that's what it's for, but you want to strike a middle ground between going after like minions, soaking and laning and stuff like that, and then like singling out, like watching your mini map and seeing who's available for you to take out, and it keeps adding to your stack. So battle momentum is something that's going to help you keep spamming your abilities after a while. And with this build, your basic attacks are going to be enough for heroes to turn around and run away from you. So just keep that in mind. You're not losing anything, really. You're just gaining with this build. At level 10, like I mentioned before, I started picking Summon Ultralisk because you don't essentially have to engage up close. You can just send this thing to go do damage for you, and you can retarget it whatever you want. And it's really good to use against targets that are about to run away from you. If you can catch on to it and you bring this thing out, it's just a game-changing ability, and it's just something that I've grown to actually favor over Maelstrom, because I can use the ability more often, for one, and it cuts down my chances of actually dying when I queue it up, unlike Maelstrom, where you have to be directly in an enemy's face for this to actually do anything. So that's basically the difference between the two. At level 13, this is where we start working on our defensive side of things to basically give you more time for your auto attacking to really like do its job. And with Lingering Essence, basically this increases the downtime, because your shield does go away. They wanted to make this fair, obviously, so because you gain a shield from basic attacks, mind you, that process becomes a lot faster at level 4 once you pick the Fury of the Swarm with the cleave option, because you're damaging multiple people, so it just becomes, you get your shield a lot faster. And basically the downtime gets increased to 12 seconds. So in other words, you have 12 seconds from your last auto attack killing an enemy to finding another enemy to start auto attacking again to maintain your shield. If you can't find another one, the shield goes away. But this basically does a good job of giving you more time to find more targets to keep that shield, because in the late stages of the game, you're gonna find that you have a shield on deck a lot more often to go along with the power that you've been building in your offense the entire time. So 13 and 16 become two very vital picks because at level 16 you're going to be picking aggressive defense, which helps your assimilation shields. Assimilation shields earned from basic attacks and abilities are increased by 100%. So basically, you get a bigger shield off of the auto attacks again that you've been building. Everything is centered. Everything with this build is centered around her auto attack. And again, you're going to be able to run off your abilities at a very good rate because you have battle momentum at the same time. So you're going to be covered on all fronts. Offensively and defensively, you're going to be pretty good as well with your picks at 13 and 16 because you're going to be getting a big shield a lot faster with 16, but then you're going to be able to maintain that shield from fight to fight with your pick at level 13. So finally, to close out this build at level 20, you definitely want to put the icing on the cake. Now, real quick, I want to mention that I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, so I'm not even going to attempt it, but this talent right here on paper sounds awesome, where your Ultralisk morphs into an egg when it dies. And if the egg isn't killed within 8 seconds, a new Ultralisk will be born. The thing about this talent that always keeps me from attempting it is that I just feel like, and again, I'm going to say attempt. I'm not going to say it doesn't work because I haven't tried it. But the thing that scares me off of trying this talent is that I just feel like wherever the Ultralisk dies is not going to be somewhere stealth. It's going to be somewhere out in the open where everything can see it. So if you can see the Ultralisk when it dies, I feel like it's clear cut that you're going to see it when it turns into an egg. And I don't feel safe leaving an egg out in the open for 8 seconds. I feel like it's a waste of talent. Like, who's not going to see an egg out in the open? Like, it's different with Murky, where Murky hides his eggs, and you have to, like, go through the whole scavenger hunt thing to find his eggs. This egg realistically will just end up out in the open, depending on where the Ultralisk dies. So I feel like it's a waste of talent. It scares me off of trying it. But if it does work, if you have tried and it does work, then that's awesome. I'm just too afraid to try it myself, so I wouldn't recommend it from my build. To finish off my build, I definitely go Nexus Blades, which adds another 20% onto the damage that you've already been building the whole time. And again, with this build, you definitely want to put an emphasis on getting stacks. You don't want to abandon your teammates. You want to be aware of where the team fights are going down because you're going to be one of the heavy hitters out there. And in a typical composition, if you're running a Kerrigan, your teammates are going to be relying on you to put some damage on enemies. So you don't want to avoid that. But again, this is a build that will keep you covered on all bases. And it puts the emphasis on an area of this character that I feel like a lot of players neglect. A lot of players put all of their talents into her abilities, and that's it. And me personally, I feel like there's a bit of a bigger gold mine into putting all of that work into her basic attacks instead of putting it into her abilities. And it's something that I've actually found a surprising amount of success with. So hopefully it's something you try out. Again, just to wrap it up, level 1, you go Seasoned Marksman. Level 4, go Fury of the Swarm. Level 7, Battle Momentum. Level 10, Ultralisk. Level 13, Lingering Essence. Level 16, Aggressive Defense. And finally, to close it out at level 20, you want to go Nexus Blades. This will give you a ton of damage on your basic attacks, and you will be able to freely run off your abilities. And again, because me personally, because I don't do the Kerrigan combo, I don't find myself out of mana virtually all that much throughout the game because I'm not using two abilities back to back all that often. So that's another little upside because your basic attacks are going to be so strong that you're going to be hitting people with those more than spending mana. So that's another little benefit to this build. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. This is just the first half of the video. Again, the second half of the video will be less detailed, but it will be showcasing the build so you can see how it works, and hopefully you come back for that. Yeah, stay tuned for that. As always, it's Achilles LBT. That's Achilles with the Z. Remember it.